Okay, in this natural language processing course, the first question that we want to ask is what a language is. And as we have said, language is a means of communication that we use between two entities. So it can be between a human being and another entity, or it can be between a machine and a human being. So language inherently is concerned about communication, sharing information between two entities. But whenever we have natural language, as I said earlier, natural language is concerned about a language that is, primarily used or solely used by human beings. So whenever we have two humans sharing information, conversing among themselves, or making a recording of their feelings or idea using their own language, and that language is what we call natural language, which cannot be easily understood by a machine or by any other party. So natural language is concerned about a language used by human beings. The other important terminology that we have to look into is the concept of language processing. Now, the idea is the main important, or the keyword in the third question is, what do we mean by processing? What happens in a process? So this is, we have a very simple question in here. If you have this word, walking, what do you understand from this? What do you understand from this word? Fugada. Fugada? Okay, I don't think Fugada is here, so Bashir?
Doctor, that means already when we are going to take steps to take some actions to go a wrong result.
So what's the difference between these two?
Work normally, that means working is on process.
On process. How do you know that? How do you know that?
Already, yeah.
How do you know
because
that?
Because there is because inaction, because someone is already in action.
Yes, how do you know? By looking into only the words. How do you know that the first one is a continuous process and the second one is not?
The second is not.
How do you know that? Only by looking into the words.
Yeah. No.
Did you get my point, Bashir? You have these two
already
words.
I have accepted.
No, you have these two words, and you say the first one is in the process, and the other one is just a verb. It's just an action. Now, how do you know the first one shows you that it is an event in a process? How do you know?
Because already the naturalist is accepted as that.
Yes, how do you know?
The word first?
I know. How do you know? Anyone?
Because already.
Anyone?
Because already is.
Anyone else? Martha? Or Mabret? Exactly. You know that the first word is in a continuous or in a progressive form because it ends with ing. Now, how did this happen? Because you know that your mind is processing the language, and it knows that either through experience or through a learning process, we know that whenever there is an ing in a word, like for example, you can have the word talk, then whenever you add ing to it, you know that it is in a progressive form. So it means your mind is actually parsing or segmenting the words and trying to give a context or a meaning to that. For instance, what do you understand from this? What do you understand from this word? Makonnen?
Yeah.
What? Yes. What does it mean?
Happy, some person being very joyful.
Okay. What about this one?
a person feels something wrong or is
Okay.
not no. Okay.
What about this one?
Something is not clear for someone.
So how do you know that these two words are opposite to one another?
By seeing a letter
UN or an,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it means that your mind is processing the elements of the language. So understanding happens only in such a way. Okay? So what we call language processing is, as a human being, we take input, and that input is going to be processed. It's going to be segmented, parsed, analyzed. If there is any error or any ambiguity, it would be disambiguated. And finally, we are going to get the content. We are going to understand the content. Now, what is the meaning of this word? Gametru, what is the meaning of this word? Gametru? Okay. Okay, Mabrad. Mabrad?
It is looking or seeing something, but the word is past.
In the
For
past
the-
tense, right? Okay.
in the
So
past
let's have this one. What about now? What is this word now? Yeah, Mabrad. What is this word?
The past of past. This one is the past one.
This one is the past one. What about this one?
So listen.
So can be the past tense of C ሊሆን ይችላል, or so can be device we use to cut wood አይደለ? መጋዝ ማለት ነው አይደለ?
Yeah.
So in this case now, when you are asked the meaning of so, you cannot simply say it is the past tense of C, because it can also be, the equipment that we use to cut wood. But in this case, if you see, in the first case, it is referring to the past tense, but in the second case, it is referring to the device that we use, right? So in this case, our mind is actually doing a process. It takes a sentence, it takes a word, it takes a phrase, and tries to, parse it, segment it, relate it with, the knowledge that we have, and try to give a meaning to it. So basically, that's what we call is language processing. Our mind is always occupied with this task of language processing, understanding the language, generating a language. So if I give you this one, if I give you the word boy, and if I ask you to make it plural, what do you do? If I ask you to make it plural, what do you do? Makonnen? No, Yeshuas. Yeshuas.
Add S.
So what you do is to make it plural, you are going to add S to it. So it's going to be boys. Now you know that it is in a plural form. What if I give you the word city then? What do you do?
We add already IES. We
What
add
do we do?
IES.
So it means add IES. Then it would
Yeah.
be cities እንደዚህ ይሆናል።
Remove Y.
So this is what we're
Why
going
should
to
be
do.
removed?
It's going to be, okay, plus IES. So in this case, what we mean is, instead of adding, what we do is replace Y with IES. Now, this is a rule of the language. And your mind is equipped with this knowledge. So whenever you want to make plural of the word city, you know what to do. You are going to substitute Y with IES. In the case of boy, then you are going to simply add S. What if in the case of sheep? What if in the case of sheep? What do you do to make it plural? Yeah? It remains as it is, right? Because the plural of sheep is sheep again. So it means this is what we mean by language processing. Our mind is equipped with knowledge of processing a language, either to generate or even to analyze, to understand as well as to generate. That's what we do. So what we call language processing is the task of performing such kind of tasks, generating a language construct or understanding a language construct or analyzing a language construct is what we call language processing. And you can do it in a written form or you can do it in a spoken form. For example, our ear, our mind, our mouth is dedicated to perform such kind of tasks, okay? So the question in here is, why do we need to process natural language? As we said, as a human being, this is one of the phenomena that we possess as a human being. We are equipped with natural language, and processing that natural language is our inherent property. But when we try to delegate most of the job that we have in the real world to the computer, like communication, documentation, recording, and information transmission from one location to the other, and even for knowledge preservation for a longer period, for knowledge dissemination, for different kind of analysis, then we need the computer to process the language. So whenever we think about processing a language, and whenever we want to do that using a computer system, then the concept of natural language processing or computational linguistics would be, at our service. And that is to use a computer, which means to develop a computational system that can, process the language as we do, that can understand the written text, that can understand how words are formed, that can generate a word, that can understand a human speech, that can produce a human-like speech. So there are many NLP applications that we have, and we use a computer for this purpose because we know that computer programs can be easily replicated, unlike learning a language by a human being. And we know that the computer is very fast and accurate when it comes to data processing, data acquisition, and data transfer. So for this purpose, we are going to use a computer to process a language or to process a natural language. So the course is, all about these things throughout, throughout the session. That's what we are going to talk about. Now, let's have a very basic definition of what natural language processing is. So natural language processing is concerned about, two things. One thing is going to actually deal with a computational technology or a computational method for the purpose of, one, investigating human language. We are investigating a human language whenever you try to understand how plural words are formed, or whenever you want to understand how ambiguous words are handled by human beings. And whenever we want to transfer that knowledge to the computer, we are dealing with a computational technology that works on a human language. At the same time, we can use natural language to evaluate some of the claims made about a human language. We know that human language, or language in general, is a very sophisticated, a very abstract, construct that we have. And understanding and evaluating those elements, or those humanistic elements, is, it requires some technical approach, or what we call methodological approach. And we know that natural language processing is equipped with this knowledge. The other definition that we have, mind you, the term natural language processing, computational linguistics, language technology are, used interchangeably. So what we say is computational linguistics. Pay attention to the terms that we use in here. We say computational linguistics, which means we are dealing with two things. One, we are talking about linguistics, because the study of language is linguistics. So how words are formed, how words are related, how words are grouped, how meaning is extracted from a word or a phrase or a sentence, and such kind of things, or even how a speech is produced, how a sound affect one another. All these are linguistic concepts. But we want to do, or we want to analyze or handle these cases using a computational method or using a computer program. That's what it means when we say computational. So that's why people also call it computational linguistics. So the focus is not on the theoretical part of linguistics, but how to have a computational system to manage linguistic constructs. So that's why we call it computational linguistics. So it belongs to the broader concept of artificial intelligence, because language processing is one of the intelligence that we have as a human being. So whenever you write a computer program to understand the human language, you are actually working under the umbrella of artificial intelligence. So we say it is a study of, okay, the cognitive function by a computational process. You see, in a computational process, we are trying to, input, or we are trying to introduce a cognitive function, because language processing is a cognitive function, as we have seen earlier. To make a word to be in plural form or in a progressive form, what we do is we have a cognitive function that actually tries to understand or produce a word in a continuous form, or a word in a plural or in a past tense form, or whatever, to distinguish that the word so has multiple meaning, one as a past tense of see, the other one as, the device that we use to cut wood. It has a cognitive function. And to try to understand, or to try to put that cognitive function into a computational system, is an artificial intelligence task. But at the same time, we are concerned about how knowledge is represented, okay? Because for the computer system, the most important element is the representation of data. Whenever you write any program, whenever you try to develop any system, the first thing that you worry about is how a data or information used by that system is represented inside the computer system. And this is a very critical question that you need to respond to. So language is a very sophisticated element, and discussing or deciding on how that element is represented inside the computer system is a very critical question. So we know that whenever you deal with computational linguistics or natural language processing, we're concerned about how the knowledge of the language is represented inside the computer system. So the scope that we have in natural language processing mainly focuses on two important data types. The first one is on a speech data type, and the other one is on a text data type, which means as a human being, we are using two modes of communication. One, we use a speech communication. We communicate with one another using voice, or using a spoken language. So there is a natural language processing that focuses on speech technology, because the data type is quite different, the processing method is quite different, the understanding and the representation is quite different. So in a speech technology, we're concerned about accepting a sound in analog form, represent it or digitize it in the computer, try to parse it using different technologies, and finally understand the words that are within that utterance, the words that are within that communication. Then after that, another process in a speech technology is a written text, an electronic text inside the computer can be converted to a speech by the computer. We call that text-to-speech system. So these two technologies, we call it a speech technology, and it focuses only on sound communication between the internal and the external world, which means between the computer and the external world. The other end, the most researched technology is text technology, because we know that to preserve knowledge through the development of the human race, we have seen that people have been developing different representation method, and one of it is a symbolic representation of a text, which means a written representation. Like, for example, the word text has to be written in such a way, T-E-X-T. So T-E-X-T is a written representation of the sound text, okay? The sound that, or the speech that we produce. So we know that this is an artificial representation. That's why we have many different kinds of scripting methods all over the world, for Amharic, for English, for Chinese, Japanese, so and so. For Arabic, we have many different kinds of scripting methods, but mind you, the sound is the same. Wherever you go, the sound S is S everywhere, whether it's in English, in Amharic, in French, in Afan Oromo, in Wolaita, in Sidama, in Tigrinya, in Ge'ez, in Kafenono, any language, the sound S is always S. But based on the scripting method, based on the written method, the representation is different. For Amharic, it is a different letter. For English, it's a different one. For Arabic, for Chinese, for Walaita, for other language, it might be of a different symbol. So that what we call text technology is one, to understand the written form, and the other one, to produce a written form of the language. So as we said earlier, somebody might give you the word cat and ask you to make it plural. So in the process, what you do is you are going to add the letter S. If it was in Amharic, then that would be quite different because we don't use the letter S to make it plural. Rather, we use watch or watch as an attachment. ስለዚህ ምን እንላለን? ድመት እንልና watch እንጨምርበትና ድመቶች ይሆናል። ያን ጊዜ it is plural. So it's not like that of the English formation. So what we call text technology is a technology or a computational system that, dedicate itself to process a written text in a language. But sometimes you might find it combined. The two things might, be combined. In this case, we call it multimodal, or we call it multimedia technology that combines text, speech, as well as graphical representation. But all this, we call it language technology. But as I said earlier, again, in the process of language, in the task of language processing, we know that knowledge technology is very important because language is a human phenomena, as we said earlier, and it depends on the knowledge that we have. So knowledge technology is very important because knowledge technology is concerned about the representation of knowledge inside the computer system. So whether it's in a speech form or in a text form, how that thing is